What is up, ladies and gentlemen? And we are back with our eighth edition. I think you're really going to enjoy this part. It's part eight, the infinity sign. Yeah, I think you're really going to enjoy this. I'm your host, Ice. Thank you for being here. Um, Today, we are going to cover Tom DeLonge. Now, uh, I had a speech all prepared. Let's see. I know that you think that we don't have a memory, but we do, especially us citizens. Um, I know you probably think, well, I don't think I'm particularly clever, but I am off the couch. The American citizenry have always been intelligent, I guess you could say. Um, we're just actually off the couch now and doing research because it's gotten to a point where events, world events, are interfering with us. To put it mildly, you are entering our lawn, and we want you to get off our lawn. So now we're off the couch doing all these things. Now today is not a hit piece on TTSA or Tom DeLonge. I don't want you to think that. Actually, a lot of people think that I've been playing favorites, that I've been too much on right camp, which I guess would be like Stephen Greer and Mick West, and not so much against the left camp, which I guess would be like TTSA, Luis Elizondo. But I don't. Here's the thing. I'm very much pro U.S. Government, more specifically Bill of Rights. Um, and so I just want to make that clear. But the facts are the facts, and that the U.S. government has actually a bad track record of trustworthiness. So in a situation like this, it's hard. But I think you're pleasantly going to be surprised. Okay, to just jump into what we got going on, I analyzed the JRE podcast, which is number 1029. Oh, I apologize for this format too. It's probably hard for you to see it. There was a problem with one of my word editors, and I couldn't bring up the program, so I had to use a notepad. So I'm kind of limited. You'll also notice how really bad of a speller I am because they don't have Notepad doesn't have spell check, or maybe I should have used Notepad plus plus, which I do have that program too. I got Visual Studio Code, but we're going to be talking about this episode here, more specifically this episode here, and I'll play a little clip of it.
There's a time difference between what they're doing inside of an artificially created bubble of gravity of.
Now it's fast. It's very fascinating. So I watched the whole thing. You can't really even find it on the internet anymore. It's been completely scrubbed. But I was able to find it on MX Cloud, which is right here. It's the full episode. The one actually from at the time used to be his I guess his website, or whatever hub platform he used. Maybe maybe iTunes. Because I noticed that there was a lot of intro with commercials, and at the conclusion there's a whole bunch of dates and other information that you wouldn't see on YouTube. And I used to always just watch his YouTube channel. He's on Spotify now, so go check Spotify. But before we begin, so I analyzed the whole thing and I created this briefing. And I think it's very important. Tom DeLonge is an interesting character. This whole episode is absolutely fascinating because it very much has a lot to do with the UAPTF report. Um, so he's tied in very interestingly on this whole situation. And so we're going to get into that. Another thing you need to ask is, why hasn't Tom DeLonge done any interviews since the UAPTF report. Matter of fact, I'm assuming that TTSA, I guess it's defunct. I don't know. But we're going to talk about the whole proof of concept of TTSA. And actually, there's a lot of goods and maybe, I guess, some bads involved. Um, so this is going to be a pro TTSA episode. And since Tom DeLonge hasn't showed up for any interviews, well, I figured, you know, we'll bring him in from his own words. So basically, we took out. So, okay, so I listened to the whole episode, right? I summarized his story on how it all came to be here, all the major players that were involved, and everything he said is exactly from his mouth, right? There was no fudging at all. We got confirmed facts here. Now, there's confirmed. It's like I said, his story is very interesting how it ties in to the UAPTF report, which we're going to get in. But so basically, I broke it up into three categories. One is Tom DeLonge's belief, Tom DeLonge's statements, and Tom DeLonge's claim. But before we get into that, on a my policy is I don't like to really get into attacking fellow alternative media channels or whatever. And Tom DeLonge is not considered mainstream media. Now, I will attack mainstream media. I will attack corrupted governments and or corporations. Basically, I'll attack entities, whether it's an elite system, like Davos or Bilderberg Group, and I have no problem doing that. I don't like to attack individual people, even though that I am very well aware that some, I guess, alternative media channels could be compromised, or whatever, giving out disinfo or misinfo, stuff like that. It's just one of my things. I don't like to do it. So before we even begin, I just like to say, on a personal tip, Tom DeLonge seems like a pretty fairly cool guy. He is self-accomplished. And so you always have to respect that. I did an episode a long time ago, go back to season 2, called Artie Chronically, where I delved a little bit into Elon Musk. Same thing. I made a disclaimer. On a personal tip, I think the guy's a nice guy. He's pretty cool. Matter of fact, I just want to make this clear from all the different angles, from left camp to right camp, from to Lou Elizondo to UCR to Stephen Greer to Mick West or anybody that I've ever, I guess, seen, watched, learned from, or whatever. Everyone I don't have a personal, I have on a personal level, I think are all very nice, cool people. I like everybody actually. It has nothing to do with business and why I'm here. My thing is just I'm just a normal citizen doing his part, fighting a system that obviously requires a lot of participants. It's my personal belief that, or what motivates me strongly, so if you want to get an insight of my character, is that I believe we're at a particular time in history where technology is very dangerous. I think in the past, technology has benefited humanity, but we're at a certain time where technology can actually be very dangerous to humanity. And so that, before things turn into certain things, like clearly we're headed into a one world government. I think that actually, we're going to get into that a little bit. This report talks or hints to that. And that you can't have a one world government without humanity being at the forefront. And humanity essentially comes down to basic civil liberties, God given libertarian rights like the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, or the Bill of Rights. Now, I'm all for a one world government as long as you want to put the American system in place, a constitutional republic based on the U.S. Constitution. If you want to have that as the forefront of a one world government, sure, I guess we could try it, even though I don't think we are psychologically evolved for such a thing. I mean, but it seems like there's this push towards that. It's a rapid push towards that. And uh, optimistically, the excuse is, well, we want to avoid war, which I can understand that. I mean, in today's day and age with advanced, very, very advanced weaponry, whether it's biological, uh, cyber, chemical, all this and stuff, it is important to have a certain amount of order, But like I said, you can never sacrifice liberty at the expense of safety. You just can't do that. So we're kind of, it's an interesting challenge to say the least. Certainly, I know a lot of things, but like everybody, I'm human, right? Which means that I could tell you certain things that we should do. Like for one, number one, cooperation is going to be key, whether we like it or not. If we don't have a certain amount of working together as a species, we're not going to make it. Now that is an advanced concept of wisdom, right? Wisdom. Now that comes to everything. Like, see, as humans, we do accept the fact that number one, we're fallible, which we're emotional. Which, for example, if somebody insults you or takes your stuff or steals your girlfriend or whatever, you're going to respond instinctually, right? In any type of force, okay? And that's just how it is. Now that cycle will always continue itself until eventually we kill each other, right? And so that's what we have to avoid, but not at the expense of destroying our humanity, which means individualism, creativity, expression, liberty, stuff like that. So that is the main challenge. Now, like I said, I proclaim all these things, but I'm just like everybody else. I can go from an instant of loving someone to hating someone at a drop of a dime because I'm a very emotional being. Now, what does that entail? That entails forgiveness. That's why forgiveness is a very strong concept that we as a species must learn to do. That's the whole Christianity concept, forgiveness, right? Or redemption. So I just want you to, just for as you to know that, don't think of me as a hypocrite. I mean, hey, look, I mean, hypocrite is only somebody that consciously or con- uh, uh, knowingly is lying to you and doing another thing. That's a hypocrite. Somebody that claims, hey, look, I know these things, but at the same time, I'm susceptible of violating what I just told you. Like, I know forgiveness is good, but at the same time, I still suffer just like everybody else and struggle to, give forgiveness. Okay, so that is not a hypocrite. But I just wanted you to know that about me. Okay, so that is the main reason why I do what I do. Like I said, we are battling technology, which means nanobots, biological technology, AI, hive mind, internet, all these things, right? And we just have to make sure that humanity and liberty is at the forefront of this new frontier, if you will. Okay, so that being out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this because I think you're really going to like it. So let's begin. It's going to be a little long one, so hang with me. Okay, so the JRE podcast, number 1029, guest, Tom DeLonge. Air date, October 27th, 2017. That's important. I hope you can see this, but I'll read it to you. Okay, so the proceeding is entirely from the mouth of Tom DeLonge and should be taken in context as a casual conversation. Because throughout this, he makes a lot of claims, statements, and beliefs. But take it in context. And Tom's claims shouldn't be taken as the same as the U.S. government's claims, but is something to consider. Now, this is interesting because Tom DeLonge works directly with the U.S. government, or so he claims. Now, it's funny because we do have verified facts. So these claims actually should be taken kind of seriously. It's fascinating. For example, okay, so anyway, keep going. For example, Tom could 100% believe his claims are real. Okay, intro. Tom DeLonge reached out to the JRE show about AATs, Advanced Aerial Threats. It's interesting that he calls them AATs at the time of this airing. So that's very important too. Tom initiated contact with the JRE show, not the other way around. Okay, so his cohorts. Now, cohort is not a bad name. It means coercion. It just means acquaintance. But from movies, we always think cohort as a bad word. So let's get to know the team, shall we? Tom DeLonge. He's the chairman of the entertainment division. We got this guy, Jim Semivan. 25 years. You know, it's fascinating. Like, the whole concept of this, I believe, before we jump in, actually, it's I watched it back in, at the time of this airing, we thought nothing of it, right? But now that events have transpired, which is the UAPTF report, now we can go back and analyze his show and realize a lot of the stuff he was claiming later came true, right? So, anyway, as far as what he said, okay, so that's his team. Look at this: 25 years, operations officer for the Central Intelligence Agency's Directorate of Operations. 30 years career of acquiring financing. So he's got a legitimate, huge company going on. And the concept is actually fairly good. It's actually a pretty interesting concept, and I can see why the U.S. government took him up on his offer, but we'll get into that later. Okay, Herndon, Director of White House Information Technology. Of course, Hal Puthoff, Department of Defense research scientist and physicist. Advisor to the NASA Department of Defense. I mean, track record is crazy. Brain function and consciousness consultant. Former CIA Counter Biological Weapons Program. Department of Defense Traumatic Injury Research Program. AI expert. I mean, it's just fascinating. And of course, Luis Elizondo. Now, in the episode, he names a few more people. He says Hal Puthoff, Luis Elizondo, head of Skunkworks, Steve Justice. He said he has a SCS-2. We'll get into that later. He's got Undersecretary of the Senate Committee. That's interesting because he claimed that he's got an Undersecretary of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So, at the time we didn't think nothing of it, right? But now we know that, there was a report given to the Senate Intelligence Agency, which was initiated by Senator Marco L. Rubio. Okay, all retired or consultants for the IC. Later describes Luis Elizondo as a GS-15. Was in charge of all classified material concerning AATs under Secretary Mattis, which was under the Trump administration, and ran the AAT Advanced Aerial Threat Program for the U.S. So that's interesting. That's coming from, like I said, this is all. I sat and watched the whole program and stopped the tape at every time Mr. Tom DeLonge made a statement, belief, or claim. All right? So it gives us some insight. Okay, so throughout this briefing, I'll be using the term topic or subject, right? So if you hear me say topic or subject, means this is interchangeable for both UAPs and ufology together. So the basic, topic or subject of the UAP and ufology together. Does that make sense? Okay, so throughout the episode when he's talking to Joe Rogan, he talks about his story. He basically says how it all started. So it's funny because, here's our confirmed facts. In a large part, Tom DeLonge was the catalyst for the UAPTF report. He was a part of the catalyst to the UAPT report. And I'm going to explain why, and he describes it in the story. So the story, and this is all his words now. I take it from, how he said it. The story happened roughly 2 years prior to the JRE show. Thus, this would have been around 2015. His story. Here goes. Tom was always fascinated with ufology and had a startup company called To the Stars that was diverse in apparel and documentaries and movies. Or at least he was, a startup. Especially the topic of ETs or UFOs. Now, Tom DeLonge seeked out approval first. Okay. He states he initiated contact with the DoD, and they responded with an email, anonymous, with instructions to meet outside Pentagon. So he goes and meets with higher up, and is also introduced to a general. This is all anonymous, that's what he says. Tom states he knows what's going on from his own open source intelligence efforts, and agrees with their handling of the topic over the decades, and says he wants to cooperate. Pitches his idea about him being the liaison or communications person from or for the DoD to the masses, the bridge, if you will, to help in the process of disclosure. Okay. He had a meeting at the NSA Ames for 2 hours, okay, which is this right here. This is the Ames Research Center. This is all what he claims. So either it's a lie, or this is some serious stuff going on. Okay. Now at the time, remember, you got to admit, at the time we just kind of said, this guy's crazy. Or at the time, look, I was actually really interested in it. I thought, hey, cool, let's do it. I was totally on board. I was sold, basically, right? Okay, so moving on. For 2 hours, states had an off-record lunch meeting. This is after. This is another meeting at the time. He's going through meetings at this process. Had an off-record lunch meeting with unknown, and says, he just won't state, and says he was told that during the Cold War, the U.S. recovered a life form, referring to aliens. Okay. States that one must provide a service in order for the U.S. to talk or meet with you. States his service is a third option in disclosure and will be comms director. They, the U.S., uniformly agreed. According to him, it resonated with them. Says his book, Secret Machines, which is right here. Secret Machines, we'll get into that later. Ties in the subject fairly accurate. And see, when I use the word subject, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. U.S. asks him what he needs. He answers, I need advisors. Shortly after he receives emails from admirals and generals. He says, not from any IC agency, but mainly military and NRO. Tom also has the wherewithal to know that the NRO is about half Air Force and half CIA, which is true. Tom then proceeds to implement his plan of PR, doing radio and book interviews. When he is approached by a particular agency, he doesn't specify which. Tom is then taken to a hotel location, he said close to his house, and interrogated by 6 people for 2 days about who he is and what he knows specifically, and what he knows specifically what's in his book. Okay, first off, that makes total sense because his actions right here would have drew a lot of red flags. This right here alone he would have popped up on the radar when he was getting emails from a lot of generals and admirals about this particular subject. You know that he would totally have popped up on the radar big time. So that makes sense. That's definitely plausible. Somebody would totally. We can guess that it would probably either be the FBI or Homeland Security, or it could have been a counter agency because we know that Air Force has their own CI division, the Navy has their own CI division, and that's plausible because the Navy would have been monitoring the emails as a security measure. That's totally normal, and be like, well, what the hell? Why is all our admirals emailing this guy? Then they would have contacted the FBI, and they would have had a sit down, an interrogation. Uh, let's take okay. So Tom says that they wanted to know, who he is and basically what are you doing? What's your purpose? What are you trying to do? Especially about the book. Supposedly his book has a lot of accurate details, especially that there is a core a concerted, sorry, my spelling's bad, concerted international group or assets dealing with this issue. So in his book, he put together through open source, right? And that's very plausible because if you are organized enough and if you are good at analyzing the situation, he said especially through finance, he concluded that there is a concerted international group or assets dealing with this issue. That means topic or subject. You know what I mean by that. Concerned he was giving leaked top secret information. That's plausible. I mean, if he's in contact all of a sudden with top brass, as he puts it, right, military, NRO, he's going to be investigated. But he explained the situation. He said I didn't have nothing to hide, and that he basically told them everything, the truth. They probably checked on it, and I guess he's good to go. So this is where it gets interesting. So confirmed fact number one, like I just said, he is based on this story, right? Based on this story, he is or is a part of the catalyst to the UAPT report. So it's interesting that he's not doing no interviews anymore. I don't know what's going on. I guess he just said the hell with it, or he served his purpose. Now we're going to talk about this and how this played out. Here's a story and how it played out before we talk about these confirmed facts. Now, so this, the movie. What's that documentary called? It's with that Air Force CI guy. That what's the movie called? What is it called? It's hold on. Let me look it up real quick. It's Richard Doty, right? Mirage, I think. Well, okay, so they used an opportunity to run like a disinfo, some kind of misinfo, disinfo, whatever operation using a guy who's curious on the subject, right? The same. Now, I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just saying that this had to be considered, But we don't know all the details. Like, I'm sure if he reached out to the CIA, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, let's see what we can, use this guy for," because that's what they do. You gotta understand, they, as cold and callous as it sounds, that's the name of the game is manipulation, right? Um, you know, the CIA does it basically manipulates people, right? So this is what happened to Anybody they can say, hey, we've been scouting you out, we've been checking you out, and we want to recruit you to become a CIA guy. Of course, black ops off the books, right? And the person would be like, oh, really cool, man. Yeah, hell yeah, I want to do that. But in reality, they're just using this guy as a patsy, right? So they say, oh yeah, go rob a bank for us in the name of national defense. Of course, we can't have any connection to you, right? Or go infiltrate this building, and get us some information, for national security. And you'd be serving your country, right? That's how that works. They play people, right? They play people. Not always, not always, but it's definitely something you should consider, right? Same with Timothy McVeigh, right? So the unofficial story of what happened was that he was recruited, right? And they fed him the same story. Oh yeah, we want you to work for the, I don't know, the who knows what group, in the U.S. government, or maybe they went through a proxy, but whatever corporation. Say, hey, we want you to infiltrate undercover, infiltrate these militias, and provide us intelligence. Well, he goes, sure, yeah, that sounds tight. Who wouldn't want to do that, right? Who wouldn't want to be an agent? I mean, it sounds fun, right? But they don't have no loyalty to these people. They hang you out to dry. That's like this code of the streets. See, at least I have a little bit of knowledge on that. I know how it works. Remember, I've put out, if you watch a lot of my videos, right? I say don't ever trust anybody. That's the number one rule of the streets. Okay, that's why I work alone. I'd love to have a team, but the problem is how can you trust them? How can you trust people really? Unless they're your lifelong friends. But even that, people can get to them. They can get to them through money, through blackmail, through whatever means. So ultimately, you are best kind of working together, but however, you're limited because there's weakness in by yourself. I mean, there's strength in numbers is what I mean. Like if I could clone like 10 of me, I mean if I had 10 of me, right? We'd take over the world. If I had 10 motherfuckers just like me, like clone, just like me, like 100% loyalty to me and shit, we would dominate, right? I mean, it'd be ridiculous, right, on how much shit we can get done, right? But unfortunately, that's not how the world works. Anyway, my point is, this is nothing new. For example, let's say this happens all the time, right? Okay, so let's say someone from the U.S. or no, let's say somebody from the KGB during the Cold War approaches a U.S. embassy saying, "Hey, I want to be a double agent. I want to sell secrets or whatever the case was." As a matter of point, though, it was always easier to turn Americans as it was to Soviets, or was it the other way around? I don't know. The first thing you have to consider is two things. One, is he a triple agent, which means is he playing us, right, to give us false information, right, and to gather information on us. That's not hard to do. You could say, hey, here's your job. You're going to approach this embassy and say that you want to work with them, right? But you're really going to work for us. You're going to feed them disinfo, and you're also going to try to get information on what you can, right, on who their handlers are and stuff. So, as a person, you have to consider that, right? So, that's how you have to analyze the situation. Is this guy playing us, or is he legitimate? If he's legitimate, then we can really use him for information, right? So, they have to that's a judgment call. So all this has to be considered. So, what do you think is the first thing that they would consider? How can we use this guy, right? This guy approached us out of nowhere. He's famous, right? He's famous. He has a good plan. He said this is his plan. He does offer an interesting, unique service. I will get you that. So are they going to feed this guy fake information, right? To paint a narrative, just like Richard Doty did to his target, the unfortunate guy who committed suicide, which I don't believe they should have took it that far. Um, but whatever. They were practicing, propaganda on him and stuff. Um, it's tragic what happened. Um, so it's something to consider in this whole thing, right? I mean, but let's move on. We're not going to make that as a claim. We're just saying, hey, that's something to consider. Okay. Confirmed fact number 2. He was in contact with a senator of unknown, he doesn't specify, prior to the UAPTF report and Tic Tac leak, or so he claims. Possibly Senator Rubio. If you don't believe me, hey, look, this is not my words. This is Tom DeLonge's words. I watched the whole video. Like I said, this is all 100% from his mouth. However, take it in context. Confirmed fact number 3. He does use the term AAT at the time of recording. That stands for Advanced Aerial Threat. See, UAP wasn't even on the lexicon at this time, right? The same term used in Senator Rubio's report on UAPs. Remember the episode that I showed earlier? Go back a few episodes. I can't remember which one. I think it was part 4. It could have been part 3. I'm not sure. This is part 8. But I said that Senator Rubio's report uses the term AATs, Advanced Aerial Threat. Well, throughout the whole episode, Tom DeLonge uses AATs. He doesn't use UAPs. That's interesting, right? Confirmed fact number 4. He was in contact with John Podesta. This is confirmed. That's interesting because John Podesta was Obama's chief advisor. So this is serious. He makes some very, very serious claims, and a lot of it is actually verifiable. He is in the fact that was in contact with Luis Elizondo, the fact that he is in contact, he did, according to him, and why should we not believe it? He's having meetings at the Ames Research Center. I mean, just look at his team here. This is serious stuff. So, is this one of those type of operations where they're mixing half the if is it true and then half is whatever? Well, I think from a psychological standpoint, and I was analyzing his behavior and stuff. He definitely was aware of what he could say and what he wasn't. He's like, oh, let me think about this, which is, I would act the same way. If he says he's not representing himself anymore, he's representing, a lot of things. The concept is, okay, the concept of TTSA does make sense. It's not necessarily a negative operation. There is some actually specific positives from it. So he makes some very strong claims that I think a lot of people should kind of take a look at. And there is a lot of fact with his story here. It's just fascinating. We know this now, though, right? In 2021. We didn't know a lot of this in 2017. So it's interesting that we can go back. I know you don't want us citizens to have a memory, but I do. And don't get mad at me, too. I really hope nobody's getting mad at me, because if I can do this just through simple top skimming of the internet, you have to imagine, why wouldn't a third world country do this? For example, this is serious stuff, because Tom DeLonge has to be, his comms have to be hacked. Hal Puthoff's has to be, his comms have to be a target for cyber attack. Luis Elizondo, his comms, and when I mean comms, I mean every electronic device that this guy's associated with, his emails, his computer system at his house, his his cell phone, if you were a third world country, right, and this episode just aired, and I'm not talking China and Russia because they probably already kind of know all this shit. I mean, you would think they do, but a country that's up and coming that wants to acquire this technology, like say, I don't know, Syria or Estonia or something like that. What better? Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't those mid countries, or I don't know, a drug cartel or something, whatever up and kind of mid threat entity, why wouldn't they do exactly what I just did? They wouldn't break this down and see, oh, okay, this is how we can get information. Tom DeLong, he's in he just claimed he just made a as far as OPSEC, right, which is operational security, he just gave up a whole bunch of stuff. He throughout this episode says he has emails from brass, from the NRO, from the military. You don't think you're not all of a sudden a target now? I mean, if a concerted cyber attack on this guy's comms, right? To pick up information, to see what you can put together. If I'm curious about this, I'm sure a nation state like Estonia would be would be concerned. So these people are automatically possible targets of espionage, right? And this is all private too, so that Now I'm sure they've been trained on OPSEC and Tempest. If you don't know what Tempest is, it's a protocol that a lot of IC individuals go through on how to secure their communication systems, right? Hell, maybe I even am. You never know. I mean, journalists are, a big target, right? But yeah, I mean, he would definitely be a target. So he has to know that, right? And if he doesn't, then he could be used as a honey trap. What I mean by that is if the FBI or DHS knew that this guy was going to be a target, right? Then they can use him to see who would be targeting him. So they can leave traps within his computer, knowing that those traps would be picked up by people targeting him, which would have like homing beacons in so they could track back where it would go. Stuff like that. They watch him to see who's watching him. You watch the watchers, basically. And it gets into a whole big thing. Okay, so let's keep going. Confirmed fact number 5. This is how the story broke. I think he said Wall Street Journal. He could have said New York Times. He could have said the Washington Post. But the Wall Street Journal breaks story that he is in contact, coercion, with top brass with regards to this topic. So that's actually how it became public. So that's interesting. How do you think the journalists got that? Huh? Huh? How did the journalists get that? Think about it. That's what he says in his interview. Before any of this became public, right? Before he went on his media tour, that broke. That story broke. I can't remember if he said the Wall Street Journal or if he said the Washington Post, something like that. I'm not sure exact, but that's what he said. All right, so let's get into the claims, right? So we got 3 categories: belief system, statement, and claim, right? So I was filling this out as we were going down the episode. Now, there was a problem with my editor, so I couldn't bring up my report. I don't want to call it the counter report anymore, because that sounds adversarial. So I want to call it the paralleled report. And listening to the TTSA, and he talks about their main purpose, it kind of inspired me a little bit, And it kind of reminded me of, hey, I can't always be, I guess, adversarial. Even though that's my job, my job is, hey, look, the way I look at it is, if I can do this, anybody can do it, right? If and I'm not gonna play, PR guy, but that's okay because I still think I can offer a service in a sense. Anyway, let's just get into it. Belief number 1. Our generation was supposed to experience discovery that events are not accident, rather controlled events. Claim number one, they, he doesn't specify, can time travel. Claim number two, some of these are petty. I wrote down every one, but some of them are kind of insignificant, like I guess redshift. But some of them, just wait, some of them actually get really interesting. Now you got to take these claims serious because if this is serious, which there's a lot of it that is, then these claims are very interesting too. And I figured if he hasn't done any interviews, I figured I'd bring him on my show and I'll let you hear it from his own words. Claim number three. The U.S. government has advanced, I call them aerocraft, but that means, some kind of craft that's the likes of Tic Tac. We'll just say that. So if you hear aerocraft, it means something really advanced. And you know what I mean. That's what he claims. Statement number one. His company is going to be building advanced aircraft with help from higher up employee from Skunkworks. That's this guy here, Steve Justice. I mean, that's serious. This guy's really going to do this? That's serious, man. And none of this is bullshit. Bullshit in the sense that, I think legitimately, is this a giant op or is this legitimately serious? But you're going to see later how he talks about right here. Statement 15 is interesting, and it actually might make a little sense. So let's get into it. His company is going to be building advanced aircraft with help from high-up employee from Skunkworks, and his craft will be able to manipulate time as well as space. He says that. Design will be electrogravitics propulsion. He said that. I know I keep saying that. He keeps saying this, but I just want you to get the idea that I basically just took what he said, right, and I put it down. I didn't put all, I just generalized it, but this is basically what he exactly says. Okay? So, another project TTSA wants to build is called beamed energy propulsion, essentially launching CubeSats into space. I thought that was fascinating. That is, let's see if I can find it. This right here, beamed power propulsion, also known as directed energy propulsion, is a class of aircraft and spacecraft propulsion that uses energy beamed to spacecraft from a remote power plant to provide energy. Slightly different than I think what he's talking about. This is kind of a way to propel satellites. Anyway, let's keep going. Statement number two. Has not seen any aircraft physically at time of airing. So he does make that clear. Claim number four. Summarized in his book, Secret Machines, that there is an international consortium of corporations and financial institutions using funding from off the books to push back, in his words, on visitors who have been coming here for a very long time. Okay, so like I said, these claims are definitely something to consider, because a lot of his story here is some seriousness here. There is some claims now that have come true. Belief number two: the universe is very big and life is everywhere, and that there are more advanced life than us. So you can see the difference between claims, beliefs, and statements. Statements are that, basically stuff that, his company is going to do or whatever. Claims are claims that, this is fact or whatever. And beliefs are like stuff that his own personal beliefs that's different than, a claim or a statement. Does that make sense to you guys? I hope it does. That's why I categorized it into three different things. Like I said, take this in context, though. I think like I said, if I had to analyze it from a psychological point of view, I don't think he was trying to be deceptive. Some of these claims I think are true, and some of them aren't, or it just a lot of it is he. We'll get into it. We'll get into that later. Okay. Belief number 3: the craft that crashed at Roswell is German from Argentina, but craft was based on alien tech. Claim number 5: the DoD works with nefarious institutions like global finance and corporations because it believes the risks outweigh the reward with the subject. Example: aliens could be a worse threat than internal corruption. Also, Cold War never got hot because US and USSR worked together covertly on a very secret high level. That's what he claims. Claim number 6: there is multiple levels to this topic as far as who is in the know. So basically, he says that this whole subject or topic has many levels and levels of. It just means there's levels to it. And at a certain level, the U.S. and the USSR worked together when it came to this particular subject. So to be clear, he says that yes, there was legitimate animosity or a rivalry between the U.S. and USSR during the Cold War, but at a certain level, they worked together. Now that's going to be interesting in today's day and age, because we're going to get in how this I think ties into the whole COVID-19 thing, right? Because the COVID-19 thing doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't. I mean, it makes no sense. The only thing that me personally have any type of how you could make common sense of it was that okay, this is involve the currency reset. Okay, so you can shut down the economies, gives a chance through the banks to cook their books and get all their books aligned, because that's how you would do it. I mean, because the books, I mean, they were hemorrhaging at the time prior to the whole COVID thing. I mean, you had banks borrowing from banks just to pay the vig for that day, right? So if they had a week or a month to get all their books right and to cook it, then they could, keep the system from crashing. That's a plausible explanation for this COVID-19 silliness. Or you'd have to conclude that what is this, some kind of eugenics program, or that this. I mean, yes, there's the obvious. Okay, there's obvious big pharma is making money. Of course, this supposedly to this guy, this nefarious consortium of corporations and financial institutions. I mean, I could totally see these nefarious fucks trying to get everybody on. I mean, we clearly know what they're pushing towards: mandatory vaccines and QR codes. Now, what does that do? That hurts us as humanity because it probably benefits a certain few, which because now they have data, and data is everything. When you're talking about what we would think is like meaningless information, a metadata, that meaningless information, a metadata that we all give off, right, is equivalent to billions of dollars, in predictive marketing, algorithms and shit like that, right? So, I'm sure that these nefarious fucks would scheme up some kind of thing where, we have to mandatory do vaccines. Not only will they make a shit ton of money, now they can institute eugenics. So now they can pump us with fucking, maybe not right away, but down the line. Now we're getting pumped in with fucking nanobots, which we know they have the technology to do, that can God knows do what with our body. The point is now that this consortium or government of governments or corporations or whatever the fuck it is, now has control of our bodies because we fell for it. We gave our consent. They always use a crisis to usher in, more of this one world government, basically, right? And if this is true, right? If everything he's claiming is true, you know, that there is aliens and stuff, this is the reason why we could be pushing towards that one world government, right? So I'm here to say that luckily that the Patriots and the alternative media space, we checked this whole thing, and it's too late. We already beat them. We already got the hearts and minds of the people, and that this is never gonna transpire. It's not. It's actually going to backfire on them rapidly. And I'm going to tell you that here's the thing. I'm going to tell you, whoever this group is, if you're listening, which I don't think you are, I'm not crazy, but if you are listening in some kind of conscious, like some kind of higher conscious way, I'm here to tell you that you're not going to institute this bullshit. Okay, we are going to enter in the 21st century, but with the people on top. Okay, so your little pyramid, right, with the elite on top and the people on the bottom. That's not moving into the 21st century. We are going to move into the 21st century where all the people are in control. That means free energy, free communication, free expression, and all that bullshit. I don't give a damn what alien species disagree with that. You understand? And we're gonna give it to you. We're gonna give it to you what you want. You want it. You want to fight. You better believe you got it. Because we're not gonna be slaves. We're gonna be free, sentient, free will beings that God created. Now we're gonna get into gods and stuff in this topic, which is interesting because I should have had it prepared for you, but I'll just say it off memory. Okay, so moving on. Statement number 3 was not read in on this topic, was not let in on a skiff, but has been in a couple of skiffs. It stands for Secret Compartmentalized Information Facility, which is known as this, a compartmentalized skiff. Now, these are good for having secure meetings because they're like Faraday cages. Radio waves can't actually leave the building, and if everybody knows that bugs, right, are basically little transmitters. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, obviously they have to transmit their information wirelessly. I mean, you really think a bug in your apartment is wired? No, they give off radio waves. It's the same as a tracking system on your car. What does it do? It gives off radio waves. What do they call that? Low jack. Low jack. Okay. Low jack gives off a beacon signal, right? It's got to be so. So anytime you're dealing with bugs, always remember a few things, right? It has to be wireless. Rare occasions is actually wired, but it's a bug. It's been implanted, which means it has to pass its information off wirelessly, and it needs a power supply. So most bugs are going to be powered in some kind of like light bulb socket or something close to that, or it's going to have a battery. Now, some of them are very sophisticated where they'll turn off and on when they'll have when you try to sweep for bugs and stuff. I mean, all they have to do is power off. And how do you sweep for bugs? You're just radio finding that signal. That's how that works. And cop cars, when they track your location, what are they doing? They're just triangulating the signal. And what do you need to triangulate? You just need two receivers, 2 points, and then you triangulate. That's simple math. Okay, so moving on. All right. Number 8, the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, tracks UAPs coming in and out of the Earth's atmosphere. Claim number 9, the DOT figured out when these crafts come in on a routine or time-based manner to link up with other smaller or larger craft. This is very interesting, these claims. It's all plausible. It's all plausible, but yet, it's just on the word of, him, so we don't know, we're not inside the NRO, basically, to verify. Claim number 10, he has seen a piece of advanced metal believed to be made in space and interacts with consciousness from a crash in 1948. Says TTSA will be showing this and doing an experiment on it, but never did or has yet 20 has yet year by time stamped 2021. Okay. Um, Luis Elizondo is, he's having he's talking about this UAP footage, Tic Tac footage, right? Well, this is interesting stuff because he worked with this guy, Tom DeLonge, in the company, was a very big part of the company, and Tom DeLonge is going on JRE and making all these claims. This is fascinating stuff here. Statement number 4. TTSA's main purpose is to bring this technology and disclosure to the public in a controlled, transparent, and safe way, using entertainment for appeal and can generate a profit, and horizontally integrated as opposed to stovepiping. This statement is substantiated by the UCR show, which also has Elizondo as a guest. And I will say, I kind of do believe him. When you're dealing with this extremely advanced technology, right? I guess it kind of does have to be integrated into public in a very controlled and safe way. You wouldn't want any nefarious motherfuckers getting a hold of this shit, right? Or cornering the market. And we're going to get into that later with statement number 15. Statement number 5 says TTS will release footage of UFO from the Aegis system. If you don't know what the Aegis system, it's a sensor system used by the Navy to detect missiles, ballistic missiles, basically. This is huge right here. This is what he says, that they were given it. So who's giving him that information, right? So when I say he's the catalyst, they're talking. This was prior to the release of the Tic Tac, I believe. Yes, it was. He says in the show that they're going to release the footage of a UFO. Now this later turned out to be from the FLIR system of a naval jet, of basically the Tic Tac video. It's all right here, ladies and gentlemen. Claim number 11. TR-3B Astra is real, both drone and piloted models. Judgment is brought into question as he uses an example of a TR-3B video from YouTube that has been widely disputed. Statement number 6. 100% believes Robert Lazar's story. Again, judgment is brought into question as this has been widely debunked. However, love him or hate him, Mr. Lazar, he did usher in the general public into the knowledge of Area 51. So that's good. That would be an example of controlled disclosure. Claim number 12 was in a meeting about some of the things Mr. Lazar had done at the time around his deployment in Area 51. So let me summarize. He's saying he's with his, colleagues or whoever these unknown higher up people are, and they just happen to be talking about Mr. Lazar and the things he'd done at the time around his deployment. Supposedly, Mr. Lazar did some wild things. He got paranoid, thought that they were gonna basically erase him. So his story, Mr. Lazar's story, is that's why he went public to save his life. Statement number 7, that he knows or has met George Knapp. Claim number 13, has seen many documents into these AAT craft. That's another reason why he'd be a target of espionage. I mean, what does it sit on his hard drive? Statement number 8. At the time of the recording, Tom has planned meetings with unknown U.S. senators about this topic. So he's already having That's what he said in the episode. He said, I'm planning to have a meeting with a senator about this topic. He doesn't say which senator, but it could possibly be Senator Rubio. That's why the UAPTF report ties into Tom DeLonge. Like I said, don't get mad at me, okay? If I can figure this out, anybody else can. Statement number 9. Higher ups are members of, this is what he says, SES, or possibly, but I couldn't hear him correctly. I think he said SCS or SCI. Now, I couldn't figure out what SCS was or SCI, but I know what SCS is. SCS is. Oh, that's his book, by the way. Seems very interesting. He actually came out with a whole series of books prior to his JRE show. I might actually get that and read it. Check it out. It's called Secret Machines. He's got Chasing Shadows. He's got a few others. It's interesting in the book. We're going to talk about that later. But SES is Senior Executive Services, which basically is the deep state. And you got personnel that are getting paid $200,000, okay, and that I don't know. They control the government, you know. Now, supposedly, during the President Trump's administration, is that he lowered their. He couldn't get rid of them per se, but he went a roundabout way of getting rid of them by reducing their salary to like $1 or something like that, right? Now, I've never verified that. That's other experts that I trust and believe have said that. It's another claim. But anyway, that's what the Senior Executive Services is. How they go about picking these people to be that, I don't know. But that is the deep state right there. Oh, also, I think I came up with this. SCS, the Senior Civil Service. And this is from JSTOR. That's really good articles. You should check them out. I ran across it. I don't know how accurate it is, but could be the same thing he's talking about. Senior Civil Service, SCS. Okay, moving on. Belief number 4. Personally wouldn't doubt that the U.S. is in contact with ETs, but to be clear, TTSA personnel have not alluded to it. Okay, so it'd be like Lou Elizondo or Hal Puthoff. They never alluded to it, but he personally wouldn't doubt it. That's interesting, right? I mean, if that's the case, if that is actually the case, that is huge. Belief number 5 thinks that UAP's purpose is resource extraction. So here's their purpose. And this has come from him. And I think you should really consider a lot of what Tom DeLonge says in this conversation that we're having about the UAPTF, right? Resource extraction, or as he puts it, quote unquote, empire building. Now, I don't know what that means, but I'm interested to know. That's why I wish this guy would come on for some more detailed interview. Belief number 6 thinks that planet Earth is in a state or is the stage for a interstellar proxy war. Okay? Different alien races are coming here and are trying to win. I don't know exactly what trying to win specifically means. I know I like to win. Donald Trump likes to win. But we can assume what he's trying to mean. It means win some kind of dominant thing. Empire building? Okay. So planet Earth is somehow is like a stage, you know, where all these aliens try to battle or something, like a proxy stage. It's fascinating. Now, it's fascinating. Belief number 7 that some aliens look very much like us and could possibly be infiltrating our world. Dude, that is certainly plausible. That is certainly plausible. Belief number 8 believes Greys are AI clones designed for space travel. Certainly possible too. Of course, I don't know why you'd have to make them humanoid shaped. Statement number 10, that some of these beings Earth situation is connected to Atlantis. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. We're going to talk about. Okay, so we brought every subject into this. We brought, psyops. We brought electronic warfare. These are possible explanations. We brought in straight up interstellar intelligence beings, but lastly, we haven't talked about god-like beings or time travelers, if you will. Well, now we're gonna bring that to. I know it's the elephant in the room. I know nobody wants to discuss it, but we will. Okay, because when you think about it, so let's briefly. We're gonna talk about beings. Okay, so the definition of being, right? It's the meaning is actually important. Okay, so when you are in a state of being, right, it means that you're being something. Like, for example, like being nice. Be nice, right? It means you're a state of being nice. Or be cool. Remember the movie Be Cool? Hey, be cool, man. You're in a state of being cool, okay? So if you are a human being, you're in a state of being human, okay? Or any this is how the English language is made up of. This is very important words to know, right? So a state of being, you could be anything. You could be being at war, being at conflict, whatever, being in love, right? So when you talk about what a superior being would be, a lot of people have a problem with this because they don't want to talk about an advanced being could be not only technologically, right, but wisdom wise, psychologically advanced. Because we do know that us humans, right, yes, we are technologically advanced. We can build stuff because we have the good body to do it. We got hands, we got good vision with our eyes. We're ideally suited to build technology. Maybe that's our purpose. Maybe that's all our purpose is to build these technologies so that these higher beings or entities can use it, right? I don't know. I mean, but we do know that we are limited mentally because of our emotions, because that's the biggest thing. I mean, for example, like right now on Earth, if you think about it, there should be no war, right? I mean, if we all worked together, right, we all could develop the technology to have unlimited supply of resources, right? The only thing that stops that is a lot of factors, but one of it is our emotional instincts, like fear, right? Fear and pride, all kinds of things, right? Our root programming when it comes to sex and food and stuff like that, right? So we are limited mentally. So beings that are superior could be have gotten to the point where they've mastered all those particular virtues, right? Now, it can be done. We know that there's people that do it on this earth. Like, for example, Navy SEALs, right? That's a prime example of a person who has mastered not everything in life, but a portion of a life. Like, I mean, to be able to master physical fortitude, I mean, that's what a Navy SEAL has to do, right? I mean, they have to control their adrenaline, their emotions, their physical sensors. I mean, that's their whole motto is that, the only easy day was yesterday. So imagine if you had that type of mastery of your emotions to where you could wake up every day and take on any challenge that the world throws you with a complete and 100% positive attitude, right? That's considered mastering that particular set of emotion. Well, let's talk about another thing. Let's talk about how you judge people. I mean, it's weird, isn't it, that we have all these different races on this planet, right? I mean, do you think that it's a training program for us to master um, people of? I mean, think about it. Like, what's the biggest reason that races don't get along, right? Because races are different in a lot of different things. Both culturally, they're different. They look different. They act different, and a lot of times they think differently. That creates conflict, right? So if you can master that and not fall into the trap of giving into your emotions, right? It's the same with it's any type of ideology that we experience on this planet, right? Um, I mean, yes, we're going to have ideological differences, but how do we handle it? Do we handle it through violence or do we handle it through diplomacy, right? So these beings, so you, when I'm talking about these superior beings, they don't necessarily have to be superior just technologically. You have to know how to use the technology, right? If they've managed, for example, to still be alive without blowing themselves up, it indicates that they have learned to harness, or that they have the maturity to handle technological advancement. Now, do humans have that? I mean, think about it. Ask yourself, like, aren't you like, I suffer from that every day. I wake up every day and I get my ass kicked by life, whether it's getting cut off in traffic, or wanting to get with this girl here, or being jealous of this guy, or getting frustrated with what's going on in politics or whatever. I mean, do you think we really have the maturity that we haven't just blown ourselves up yet? I mean, how did we survive the Cold War, right? I mean, it does indicate that there is a higher being presence, if you want to call it aliens, whatever you want to call it, that does kind of guide this planet, right? Now, at, at a certain point, right, what's the difference between gods and aliens, right? Well, the only difference is your perception of it. Okay, so when you say aliens, the first thing that comes to your imagination would be like greys or reptilians or something that you don't naturally associate with a benevolent god, right? So you instantaneously uh, deny it. It's like, oh, or you associate gods with religion. Religion is man-made, and we know that everything that goes along with religion, like the Crusades and all the corruption of the Vatican, and blah 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 blah. That's why they don't like to associate aliens with gods. But if you can separate yourself mentally from your preconceived perceptions or notions, then you would say, well, what is the difference? Right? I mean, okay, so there's layers of, and we're not talking, let's not talk about the God, the God, the creator of the universe, right? Which I believe that there is, right? But that within this universe, there is, let's say if this world is a physical universe, right? And that there is, if it's like what we perceive and not some funky simulation or whatever, and it could be very well that too. It could be layers of simulations, right? But we don't want to get into like consciousness and thought and all that stuff too far much. It's funny that you get into thought, because thought. Okay. Anyway, the point is okay. That's all I'm trying to say, right? So okay. Now, I also, if you look back to some of my old episodes, you remember when I told you that to be like water? What is, like Bruce Lee, be like water? Well, what's the lesson that you learned back after January 6th? I don't know. Go back to some of my episodes. I say, okay, once you declare a state of something, right? Like, oh, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you put yourself in an automatic opposite state being, right? So a lot of these philosophers talk about the non-duality principle, right? Like we're all just one, right? A state of oneness. That's what they call it. A state of state and being are kind of interchangeable, right? You're in a state of this, or you're a being. You're being this, right? So, and I don't want to get too much philosophy, but being stateless or like water, it means that you become whatever you is. So you basically denying any type of state of being. It's like Bruce it's a kind of complicated subject. I know I'm chopping it up right now, and so I want to just move on. But this is what he claims. Okay, that some of these beings or Earth's or the Earth situation as we know it is connected to Atlantis. A small advanced group has remained here in the solar system and has guided humanity over the ages. Connects Atlantis with Greek god mythology. Says Roswell crash wreckage had Greek writing on it. Now, he did contradict himself here, but we can't deny the fact that our history, so the last 5,000 of written history or whatever it is, does have all this symbology. Now, Greek mythology, god mythology, is connected to Egyptian god mythology, right? Egyptian god mythology has the pyramids, which we don't know. I mean, if you analyze it, it doesn't make sense that we could have produced it at that time using the tools, right? So where did it come from, right? How long has it really been there? We know stone can last eons, right? I want you to look at this slide here. Here's Sumer, right? This is one of the earliest civilizations in known human history, written history. Okay? 4500 BC. That's about 7,000 years ago. That's about as far as we go back, right? Now, if you want to get into evolution, then we've been here for about 100,000 years. If you want to get into ancient alien philosophy, this is our first origins on this planet, right? Sumerian. Sumerian has a lot of parallels with this. This is called take a gander of mythological family trees of both the Egyptian, Greek, and Norse gods, right? Okay, so Greek culture, or I guess god mythology, copied Egypt, right? Rome copied Greek. England copied Rome. And U.S. or D.C., Washington, D.C., copied England, right? So here is an example of these gods, right? This is the Egyptian god family tree. There's all these god beings, right? So these gods could be aliens, but you're saying, well, that's not possible. Well, why? Why isn't it? If they have the technology to live 1,000 years or whatever, or thousands and thousands of years, and they can time travel and they can do all this, what's the difference between being demigods and aliens, right? There is no difference. Now, whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not, is what I'm saying. It's like Neil deGrasse Tyson says, science doesn't appreciate your feelings or something like that. Well, throughout history, there is a bunch of this symbology that we cannot deny. So how could you deny this with the topic of UAPTF? Now, I know that they don't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. But it is a factor. Same with Greek, okay? When you look at all the astrological constellations, right? They're in Greek. When you look at the horoscopes, right? It's similar. It's either it's Greek or Egyptian or Sumerian or something like that. I don't know offhand. When you talk about Masons, right? The Illuminati, they are closely tied to this. The Eye of Horus, right? The all-seeing Eye of Horus, right? Same with the Eye of Providence, right? Here's another one. It's the Norse god family tree, right? Now, the only difference between this, or what the commonality is that they're a family. See that? Family. Family's very important, right? And now, the difference between this and, say, the Abrahamic religion structure is that these are demigods, and that, you know, that but there's a lot of similarities going back to that ties back to this time too. So we do know that for a fact. Whether we believe it or not, it is a factor that we have to consider, and that's what I'm considering. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Statement number 11 says former director of CIA and NSA. He wouldn't say, but we know it's Hayden. Tells Tom that he's a big fan of Greek mythology. Tom replies that he would love his last page of his book, which has an insert of Greek mythology. So Tom DeLonge heavily believes in that these gods are from Atlantis, and that it could very well be these Egyptian demigods or deities. They could be Atlantis, watching over our planet, guiding it. Now, when it comes to the statements he says, it might very well be plausible, because if you think about how we're with the whole COVID-19 thing, it doesn't make any damn sense. It only makes sense that some alien civilization is forcing us into this direction, right? Now, it might not be them. It could be different. I don't know. But I'm here to say, look, without the Bill of Rights, it ain't happening. You want to, the whole COVID-19 is completely 100% totalitarian, okay? And why people can't see that, I don't know. I mean, you can't, you can't, never mind, I'm not going to get into that. Okay, so, let's keep going. So it gets interesting, doesn't it? Statement number 12. SAIC defense contractor has two Greek obelisk statues called Past and the Future in front of a building. That's this. This is a defense contractor with these obelisks. That's another thing. See, this is all tied into that Egyptian slash Greek mythology, because and how it ties in to Washington D.C. Because the Masons and the Illuminati use a lot of the same symbology, right? You have the obelisk, you have the pyramid. See, there's the pyramid right there. You have the all-seeing eye, and all the Illuminati and Masonry. Like, you have all these higher up music people or whatever, like Jay-Z. They'll give that triangle symbol with their hand, or the 666 symbol, the AOK symbol, which is supposedly the affinity symbol, right? Infinity. So there's all this symbology that, like I said, whether we like it or not, I think we need to consider it, right? There is meaning behind this, and there might be clues to our past, right? Like I said, these guys have cracked time travel, so this is very interesting. Belief number 9 thinks microbial life exists on Mars and Europa, and I agree. Statement number 13 mentions Dr. Gary Nolan as important when it comes to the matter of DNA. Now, supposedly there's information in our DNA that doesn't make any sense, right? And it would indicate that we were tampered with by off-world entities. That's Gary Nolan. Spells his name with double R's. Get a chance, check him out. I will later when I get a chance. But he mentions him. Statement number 14. Thinks there has been cycles of civilization, and insiders know this as well, based on our DNA. Belief number 10. Thinks an advanced organism tampered with some sort of native life form, maybe a chimp, to create us. Statement number 15. TTS. This is okay. This is interesting. Now, this is very important. I want you to understand. This comes from his own mouth, Tom DeLonge. This is the true purpose of TTSA, and it might not be as malevolent as you think. Okay, I told you that I would come around to boosting up both sides of the camp. I don't just stick with one side. I try to be on the fence. TTSA is in contact with or in partnership with major comms and energy companies. He couldn't say which, it's classified. But see, that's why he would be totally under target of espionage. About the release, I mean, come on. I mean, how could he not? You don't think there's somebody, my counterpart, just like me, in China or Russia, diagnosing everything this guy said? About the release of advanced energy technology. This is an example of a good reason for controlled release of this information, like TTSA, because you want it to be in the right hands. This technology can radically change the world for good. States the public must own it and build it from scratch. Also, by having controlled release of disclosure info, it allows the public to own the tech so that this is important, so that private companies can't swoop in and shut it down or confiscate it. It's important right there. Here's my advice. If TTSA or UCR had a PR problem, statement 15 would be their best avenue of approach to win over the citizenry. Statement number 16. TTSA wants to use the word confirmation instead of disclosure. Belief number 11. Thinks the U.S. may have alien bodies in vats or are being preserved somehow. Belief number 12. Firmly believes TTSA can build these advanced aircraft. Statement number 17. TTSA can develop and has proof of concept of an advanced method into putting CubeSats into low Earth orbit using laser and is very cost effective. Says the U.S. Air Force has this tech. That was at the time of the recording, 2070. Thus, it's now the U.S. Space Force. That's interesting. That would radically change the industry. Good thing for you. I ran into
including
a demonstration of such technology.
His innovation is to use an energy beam as propulsion, eliminating the burden of a spaceship having to lift vast amounts of fuel above the atmosphere. Mirabeau is using a laser developed by the now defunct Strategic Defense Initiative, known in the 1980s as the Star Wars program.
Badass.
With the laser pointed upward, a high platform must be maneuvered overhead to block the beam. This laser is so intense it could accidentally cripple a satellite orbiting above.
Copy 5. Steve, you arming? Roger, arming. Copy, let's go for it. 15 seconds.
With a jet of air, Mirabeau spins the tiny spacecraft like a top to give it added stability.
Copy, 10 seconds.
The laser beam is made up of infrared light.
Alright, so based on the format of the video structure and the narration and the close in the video, it's probably from the early to mid 2000s. So God knows what they got right now, right? Alright, that's going to conclude the episode, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you liked it. I put a lot of work into it, and it's on paper now. This ain't going nowhere, okay? So we can always revert back to this, right? I hope you liked it. And one last thing. Interesting to note, Joe Rogan at the end of the episode says he will be appearing at the Masonic Theater for one of his shows. You can only get this in the full version, right? And I would like to play that for you here. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen.
San Francisco at the Masonic Theater with the great and powerful Tony Hinchcliffe.
San Francisco at the Masonic Theater. All right, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all have a great night. We'll come back here for the next installment, and I just want to know that I love you. Take care, y'all.